I'd like to call the meeting to order. Members of the public are encouraged to participate in meetings through the webcast on the internet. On the same site, they can provide written comments. They can participate by phone or by coming to the Planning Commission meeting in person. Again, I'm sorry, I'd like to call the meeting to order. If I could have the flag salute by Mike.
Join me in the flag salute to our nation and republic.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Antuna is absent. Commissioner Bedstead?
Here.
Commissioner Cunningham?
Here.
Commissioner Hatcher?
Here.
Chair Hinkle?
Here. Approvals of the minutes?
I'll motion we approve the minutes.
Second.
So we have a motion to approve the August 26, 2021 Planning Commission minutes. Motion made by Commissioner Cunningham, seconded by Chair Hatcher. Commissioner Cunningham?
Yes.
Commissioner Hatcher?
Yes.
Commissioner Bedstead?
Yes.
Chair Hinkle?
Yes. Okay, is there, Commission Secretary have any comments?
I do.
Yes.
Just a couple of minor comments. Before the meeting started, I distributed the draft Planning Commission dates for the next calendar year. If you see any conflicts between the proposed calendar and any routine events or anything that we normally schedule around that we missed, just let us know. Otherwise, you can put those on your calendar. Second item of again, minor note, not critical, is that you might have noticed we made a little bit of a facelift to the Planning Commission agenda format to more closely mirror the City Council's agenda format. So the terminology, some of the headings were modified. The historical headings that were identified previously as new and old business were removed, and those aren't used in anything that we need to discuss. We need to be agendized anyway, so we've taken those headers off, made a couple of other minor tweaks. So again, if you have any questions about that, or if we've errantly removed something that you think that we need to keep, just let me know and we'll take a look at it and make sure we're still good.
Thank you. Any Planning Commissioner comments? I see none. Is there, this is the time for the public to have an opportunity to address the Planning Commission on matters that are not listed on the agenda. Is there anybody here who'd like to speak? Is there anybody online?
None online.
Okay, we'll move on to public hearing portion of the agenda. Item 1 is consider items associated with approximately 3.4 acres of land located south of Shaw Avenue between Leonard and Aqua Deuce Avenue. The Young Properties owner, applicant, Quad Knopf, Scott Zellner, representative. First item would be to consider approval of R 2021-007, a request to rezone approximately 3.48 acres from R1 Single Family Residential Zone District to the R1 MD Single Family Residential Medium Density Zone District. And item B would be consider approval. Tract map 6377, a request to approve a vesting tentative tract map for an 18-lot single-family subdivision on approximately 3.48 acres of land. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Commissioners. As indicated, this development proposal is associated with an approximately 3.48 acre parcel that's located south of Shaw Avenue between Leonard and Agua Dulce Avenues. The project site is also within the City of Clovis' Loma Vista specific plan area. As it sits, the parcel is pretty reminiscent of a standard rural residential type property with a single-family residence in a fairly large area that is undeveloped. The development is proposing an 18-lot single-family subdivision, and the applications, of course, is being proposed is a rezone and investing tentative tract map. As you can see in this slide here, the project site's existing zone district is R1, which is a single-family residential zone district. The applicant is requesting to rezone the parcel to the R1MD single-family residential medium-density zone district. So the purpose of the rezone request is primarily to utilize the minimum parcel width standard of the R1MD zone district, which is 50 feet in comparison to that of the R1 zone district at 60 feet. That being said, the R1MD zone district do allow for more flexible development standards for this project, as it does have slightly lesser development requirements, including setbacks, and a slightly larger allowance for parcel coverage. This table here shows or lists both the R1 and R1MD zone district standards, which was provided in the staff report to Commission. And the third column there provides the difference between those two standards. So just want to kind of show you guys that the R1MD standard would allow for a little bit more of a compact type development for the single family residential proposed development. And I also like to point out that although the R1MD zone district has a minimum 45,000 square feet or 44,500 square feet parcel size or parcel size, the project itself has an average lot size of 6,800 square feet, which is larger than that of the minimum requirement for the standard R1 zone district. And in addition to that, the surrounding development, actually let me go to it better. The surrounding development or the existing subdivision that surrounds this project site, which was developed by Lennar, was approved as a PRD or planned residential development, and minimum parcel size approved for this tract map is 5,000 square feet, and there are some reduced setbacks that were approved also for this subdivision here. So although the zone districts do differ because it is surrounded by a PRD, development will be very comparable between the two sites. Go back here. The parcel is designated for medium density residential, which allows for development at 4.1 to 7 dwelling units per acre. The project itself has a density of 5.2 dwelling units per acre. Further, table LU3 from the city's general plan confirms the consistency between the medium density land use designation and the proposed R1MD zone district. The proposed vesting tentative tract map 6377 will subdivide the 3.48 acre parcel into 18 lots. The minimum lot size is about 5,500 square feet. Maximum lot size is about 9,100 square feet, and the average lot size, again, is 6,800 square feet. The project will provide a standard cul-de-sac street with a total right-of-way of 50 feet, inclusive of a 36-foot wide street that allows parking on both sides and sidewalks on both sides of the street. The site, because it is enclosed within Shaw Avenue to the north and in the existing Lennar subdivision, would be accessible through that subdivision from Gettysburg Avenue, which can be accessed from both Leonard and Agua Dulce Avenues from Shaw. The project is consistent with the city's general plan. It would not be detrimental to public health and safety, and the parcel is suitable in size for the proposed development, and of course, the proposed tract map meets the requirements of the Subdivision Map Act. With that, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission recommend approval of rezone 2021-007 to the City Council and approve tract map 6377, subject to its associated conditions of approval. This concludes staff's report, and I am open for questions.
Any questions?
Yes, Lily, I hadn't thought about it until I saw the maps up here. That's incorporated within the larger space of Shaw to Gettysburg and Leonard out to Agua Dulce. I see one access into the whole complex there. Is that correct, or is there two? I'm missing one.
Yes, so that larger subdivision is accessible from Gettysburg and Agua Dulce, which is accessible from Shaw Avenue. And so in order to get to this project site, you have to go through the existing tract map 6025.
Okay,
Mhm.
I understand that, but I'm looking at the map that's showing right now on the screen, and I see one entrance that'd be the south east corner, I guess, off of Gettysburg. And is there another one that I'm just not seeing with my old eyes, or?
So from up here?
No, down the other.
Oh, down here.
All the way down the other corner. The other there, right there.
Oh, right here. Okay.
That's the only one I'm seeing.
Okay.
Now, aren't there supposed to be two
Yes.
access
So
points?
there's this here and this here, both from Gettysburg Avenue.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, and that's all within a PRD, is that correct?
Yes.
And that is gated, is it not?
It's not.
It is not.
Mhm.
Okay.
I believe those are standard local streets.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
I have a few questions here. Is this the time we addressed the paved access to the side yard, or is it when they come back with their actual?
So it would be this time with the tract map, and condition 23 does address the requirement for that.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that.
It's okay.
How are we going to keep people going on the Dog Creek Trail from crossing Shaw Avenue right there?
So let me go
At the
here we go.
canal zone, yes, so we have that. Are we gonna put something there that's going to stop?
So right now, that's still in discussion, internal discussion with staff, but staff do recognize the dangers of crossing Shaw Avenue, especially after it's widened to 3 lanes on both sides. So we are working on realigning the trail to the intersection of Shaw and Leonard, and then crossing that intersection and then back over to the Dog Creek Trail.
Okay. And there was some discussion about the ponding basin next door. That's not gonna need to be filled at this time, is it?
I believe, and Sean may be able to answer this a little better than I can, but I believe FMSCD infrastructure has been installed, so at this point, it seems Lennar could come back and fill that to develop those lots, correct? Okay. Thank you, Sean.
Okay. That's all I have. If nobody else has anything at this time, we'll allow the project representative to speak on this project, please.
All right. Good evening. Brandon DeYoung, DeYoung Properties. Pretty straightforward, not a whole lot to go through. We've had 2 in a row here. The last one was also very straightforward with a single street in, lots on both sides. there's really not much more we can do with this development because of the constraints of the parcel. So this really is the best use of this given the zoning for this particular location. And as mentioned, it very much matches the look and the feel of the homes surrounding it within the Lennar development. So win-win-win. Win for us as a developer, win for the city, and win for the community. So I'm happy to answer any questions about it, though.
Any questions? Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, bring it back to commissioners. Okay, no more discussion. We'll open for motion.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we approve,
Before, I'm sorry.
check the
Okay.
motion, back to Paul.
Just hold your motion for a second, I've been correct. I'd like to open it for discussion from the public. Anybody within the chambers? No? Is there any online?
None.
Okay, now we'll bring it back to the commissioners and open for motion.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we approve, R 2021 TACT 007, the request to rezone 3.48 acres from R1 to R1MD.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Bedstead to approve rezone 2021-007, seconded by Commissioner Hatcher. Commissioner Bedstead?
Yes.
Commissioner Hatcher?
Yes.
Commissioner Cunningham?
Yes.
Chair Hinkle?
Yes. Okay, we'll move to item 2. Cons- Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep,
I got myself here.
you're all right.
Consider B, yes.
Yep, I'll make a motion for item B, approval of tract map 6377.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Bedstead to approve tract map 6367 with a, seconded by Commissioner Hatcher. Commissioner Bedstead?
Yes.
Commissioner Hatcher?
Yes.
Commissioner Cunningham?
Yes.
Chair Hinkle?
Yes. Okay, now we'll move to item 2. A request to amend the Clovis Development Code, Title IX, to the Clovis Municipal Code relating to housing development projects, standards, and procedures, density bonus provisions, accessory dwelling units, and review procedures. And I'll go to staff. Dave?
Thank you, Chair, and members of the Commission. As you noted, tonight's discussion is regarding the set of amendments to Title IX of the Municipal Code relating to various housing matters. This is a completely riveting discussion. I'm sure you'll be thrilled. The specific topics under consideration are housing development project standards and procedures, density bonus provisions, accessory dwelling units or ADUs, and various review procedures, primarily focusing on objective standards. A little bit of background here. These changes are really driven by a set of new and amended laws enacted at the state level, and primarily those were adopted back in October of 2019, so just a little bit less than 2 years ago as the Housing Crisis Act. There have been a couple of amendments and additional changes since then, but the bulk of the state laws that we're addressing were adopted back in 2019. What we found then, and what we've continued to find, is that compliance with state requirements is not achievable without amending the city's ordinance to be consistent with the state law. Speaking of which, back in December of 2019, the City Council adopted an emergency ordinance addressing these housing-related items, mostly the same items that are under consideration this evening. And that ordinance was amended as an urgency ordinance because there wasn't sufficient time back at the end of 2019 to adopt the new ordinance through the conventional Planning Commission and City Council review process. So it was adopted through an urgency ordinance, which was subsequently extended a couple of times, and currently has an expiration date of December 14th of 2021. So unless the the ordinance amendment is approved now, those provisions will expire, go away, and we won't be able to define compliance with the state law, and we'd very much like to be able to continue to comply with the law. As I noted previously, the proposed amendments do reflect some new and additional changes that were made by the state legislature since the urgency ordinance was initially prepared back in 2019. Just because of the I don't know, maybe luck of the draw, maybe it was strategic, but we're joined by Mr. Wolf from the city attorney's office, who, I know we can say we brought you out of retirement, but pinch hitting at least, Mr. Wolf was instrumental in guiding the city through these housing laws back in 2019, and has since helped to review the current set that are under consideration. The first set of criteria that are changing relate to density bonus provisions. The existing code provides an opportunity for additional density or a density bonus for affordable housing projects. So when we talk about a density bonus, what that means is if a project that's designed to be affordable, really that's in most instances going to be a deed-restricted affordable project. They come in, they can qualify for a bump in their allowable density above what the general plan would otherwise allow. And they are also eligible for incentives. And an example of an incentive might be a reduction in setback, or an increase in height, or a lesser parking ratio than you would otherwise see. The proposed changes include adopting a new category of eligible housing developments, along with providing corresponding density bonus provisions for that new category. References and requirements related to procedural changes to the application process for density bonuses are included, and a variety of other relatively minor changes are incorporated to bring the density bonus chapter into compliance with the state law. If you look at those individually, they don't appear to be much, but taken cumulatively, they're all necessary to allow us to be consistent with what the state currently requires. The second group of amendments relate to accessory dwelling units. We have had an ADU section in our code for quite a long time. I'm not sure when it was originally implemented. This amendment would entirely replace the existing ADU code section in order to comply with the current state law. In general, very general terms, the changes that are being incorporated make it easier to construct both ADUs and JADUs, or junior ADUs. And again, in most instances, the standards that can be applied to ADUs and junior ADUs are relaxed. So we put a couple of examples here that we think are noteworthy. The state says that for an 800 square foot ADU with a 16-foot maximum height and 4-foot side and rear setbacks, the city basically will always have to allow that ADU. There's it's not so absolute that I will tell you that in every instance that you can think of it, it has to be allowed, but as a general rule, that's the starting place, that size and configuration of an ADU is pretty much always going to be allowed by the state and thus in our code. Another interesting provision is that the potential to renovate and remodel garages and carports into ADUs is identified in the code, and that if that is done, there is no requirement on the part of the city, or there cannot be a requirement on the part of the city to replace the parking that's lost through that remodel. So it's one of the unique provisions that we are addressing in this code. Now, to date, we have received a fair amount of interest, a regular amount of interest in ADUs, but the overall quantity is not tremendous. Like I don't think we're saying more than on average. Maria, help me out. Maybe 1 or 2 a month. Is that?
That's correct.
Yeah. So we have built our code to comply with the state's requirements, and there is growing interest in the community to consider ADUs, but they have not at this point amounted to a very large volume. The third section of the amendments deals with applications and permit processes. The procedure, or a procedure, is added for filing preliminary applications, and the impact of those preliminary applications is described. So again, for preliminary application, what that means is the state has defined that a list of materials can be requested by the city of Clovis. And if those materials are received, which is less than what a full application would be, but if those materials are submitted with fees, then the development standards, code requirements, and fees applicable to that project are locked in. And so there's a benefit to going through that preliminary application for, let's say, at certain larger or more complex housing projects on average. Since the urgency ordinance with these provisions was adopted, we have not had a preliminary application filed. We do have the forms set up, and we do identify for housing projects that are eligible for it, we identify it, but thus far, our development community has not taken advantage of it. So in addition to defining that new preliminary application process, the new code amendments include procedures and timelines for the review and acceptance and approval of both preliminary and final applications. There are procedures and timelines for streamlined ministerial review, and there are requirements and procedures for by right development of low barrier navigation centers. Low barrier navigation centers are essentially facilities where homeless individuals can have temporary housing while awaiting permanent or traditional housing. And the state law requires that those be allowed by right in certain environments. Our code would allow them in basically zones that are not single-family zones. So multifamily and non-residential zones where multifamily is allowed, but not single-family. The last section of the amendment deals with objective standards and review processes. A new section or new chapter, 9.77, is added. It includes a ministerial process for housing development projects meeting certain criteria. Basically, those are multifamily projects that comply with objective standards. To date, we have had one such application in the last couple of years that was approved according to the ordinance provisions this month, I think, right? Just a couple of weeks ago. There are provisions to implement objective design criteria for all types of residential development, both single and multifamily. You may recall the discussion where we brought single-family standards for review by the council over the last several months, and finally was adopted. And then for applicable multifamily projects, not only are they allowed to be processed as a ministerial project or without discretion, but appeals are limited to fact-based appeals by the applicant. So, for instance, hypothetically, there was an aggrieved neighbor. That neighbor would not have an appeal right for these certain ministerially processed multifamily projects. So, what these proposed ordinance amendments do not address are some very recently enacted laws at the state level that were just signed into effect. Really, I think it was last week, SB 9 was in particular signed into effect. A couple key provisions there are that 2 new or additional housing units are allowed on single-family lots. So even if there is an existing home or an existing home and an ADU, 2 new dwelling units would be allowed on that lot. And the same law allows what are called urban lot splits, which allow for existing single-family lots to be split into 2 separate lots if each lot can be 1,200 square feet or larger. Now, there's still development standards that need to be met. This is not necessarily carte blanche, an indication that every single-family residential lot can accommodate 4 or more units. But clearly, we will see at some level an increase in development as opportunists take a look at this and see that they can maximize their development potential. So our current code requirements do not address this law. It's brand new. We'll be looking at it. I have not talked to the city attorney's office, but my suspicion is that we'll we'll have to take a look at this and bring this back, as a new code element. We'll have to see how it fits into our current code and how the state wants that law to be applied. So summary of the key points. These proposed amendments will permanently, and I say permanently because they're permanent only up until the next amendment, but as opposed to the urgency ordinance, they need to be adopted through this process to stay in place. The amendments are required to comply with or conform to state law. And because these amendments do implement the requirements of state law, the ordinance amendments under consideration is exempt from CEQA. And finally, future amendments will most likely be necessary to reflect new state laws. As such, staff is recommending adoption of a resolution recommending approval to the council, the development code amendments that I've described. And we'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. With the stipulation that David has to answer all of the hard questions.
Dave, I do have one question. As you were presenting to us on the density bonus, you mentioned some adjustments beyond either the general plan or development standards, and the examples you gave were, for example, height restrictions or decrease in parking. Does the developer, I presume they choose or they're electing to try to qualify for one of those, but is it one? Is it more than one? Could it be all three? What does that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mentioned that these code amendments incorporate a new category of housing development application that's eligible for density bonus. And to provide a little bit broader explanation, the code allows or identifies several different categories, starting with projects that provide as little as 10% of their project as affordable, and all the way up to 100% of the project as affordable. So for a project at the lower end of that range, there would be a single incentive or concession, while a project that is 100% affordable would allow up to 4 incentives. And there are some criteria on what kind of incentives can be applied and how they're used. I think the code looks for there to be a relationship between the feasibility of the project and the incentive. For instance, there's some unique requirements for the application of parking reductions. But in general, as long as the incentive or the application of the incentive would not result in specific adverse impacts, there's quite a lot of flexibility that's owned by the developer in the application of the density bonus requirements.
Thank you. You answered my question.
I have a few things just for clarity to make us understand a little bit better. But there are deed restrictions on these properties. Is that correct?
Which properties, and specifically on the density bonus properties, or on?
On properties where they go through and they ask for bonuses and things like that to meet certain things, so that they can add more units, whatever, or they get funding, things like that. But my understanding of what I read on what's in front of us is there are deed restrictions that will go along with this property, and some of them will stay for 55 years.
Yes.
On it. That's correct. And one of them, there's the city has first refusal right to purchase any of these properties once they have been told that they are going to go on sale, and they have 90 days to make that decision. Is that correct?
Yeah, David, I don't know if you can speak to that in detail. That's a provision out of the state law, and it's not something we've used, so I don't know the details there.
In certain contexts, that will apply when, and I know we had the option, recently there was, one of our projects was the affordability covenant, they decided to not continue it, and there was that option. See, unfortunately, the city does not have a funding source to implement those. But if we did, there's that availability, but you'd have to pay market price at that time, because assuming they've met their affordability requirements for the 55 years, then there is that option. But again, the city would have to pay the market price for that.
Right, and these properties cannot be rented. These low income.
I think it depends on what we're looking at, but if there's an affordability covenant for a single-family home for 55 years, yes, and it cannot be rented.
But it's also, it talks in there about, the properties cannot be rented that were put in under these affordability, acts and stuff.
Yes, if it's an owner-occupied unit with a 55-year affordability restriction, yes, they cannot rent it.
Yeah, they must live in it. The owner must live in it and cannot be rented.
Right, and we have, in the own homes that we sell with affordability covenants, we have those, it's very express in there that they cannot rent it, because we had a problem before.
Yes.
And so we've dealt with that.
And then, you guys discussed a minute ago, can density bonuses be combined if they qualify for more than one?
Yes, and I think, our city planner was mentioning it, the more affordable the project is, the more density bonuses they can get, up to 4. So, yeah, so if it's 100% affordable, they'll get the maximum density bonuses. And that's one of the things the new legislation did, was gave another bonus. And there's also a couple other categories where you can get density bonuses as well.
Yes, so there can be multiple
Yes.
bonuses
Later.
applied to that project.
Yeah, so you could have a pretty intense project if it's 100% affordable. I'm not sure we've had any use 100% affordability. Except, well, I guess there's the one recently.
Yeah, Butterfly Gardens is
That's the only one.
the only project that I'm aware of that has asked for and received a density bonus agreement with incentives.
Yeah, and the city will require an agreement, so we can memorialize that and make sure they're held to those affordability restrictions.
Okay, on stories, can they go above 3 stories under the bonuses?
I'm gonna let city planner, he knows the more ins and outs there. I don't think for single-family homes, they'll be able to do that, but I know I saw somewhere recently about going higher. But I don't remember, I think that might be in the new legislation. Do you remember, Dave?
I don't.
Multi-unit
we'll have to check it.
affordable, it sounded like, they could go up, 2 stories, but then it also sounded like they get an additional 3 stories.
Yes, I read that, and I'm trying to think, what context that was. I did see that. Do you know?
Page
do you know exactly
72
where?
on our,
72?
I can find
That's
it
it.
here.
Okay, you know which exact section? That might be I think that's the transit development. That's where that is, and that's why that's a little bit unique. Yes, so that's where you gotta be near a major transit stop. So in that context,
Yes,
you might lose some height control.
right, so if they fall within the major transit route and stop, they could go up,
Possibly,
yes. They
Yeah.
possibly could qualify.
In fact, in the new legislation, there's an ability for a ministerial 10-unit approval of in a transit stop, and the only thing I can think of in Clovis would be the new transit station might qualify. But it's not clear yet.
Okay. And then, under ADUs, cottage homes are kind of what we've kind of developed a name for in Clovis versus ADU. Is that correct?
Cottage homes are a particular kind of ADU, and the criteria, the compliance criteria are a little bit different because the plans are available basically for free, and so there's a little bit more strict
Yeah, they're
criteria than
basically
straight
plans
ADU.
that we have developed,
Correct.
and so we've labeled them cottage homes
Yes.
on it. Okay, just wanted to make that clear.
So one way to say it or think about it is that all cottage homes are ADUs, but not all ADUs are cottage homes. That helps or hurts, but
It also states that ADUs cannot be sold separately from primary residence. Is that affected by SB 10?
Our preliminary review says no. you'd have to do, unless you did a lot split. So, if you did a lot split and then it's not necessarily an ADU anymore, now it's one of these new homes. But we're still looking at that. But if it's a typical ADU and you fall under ADU rules, then no, because you'd have to split the lot.
Yeah, on SB 10, the little bit that I've read about it is that I can split the back and put multi-units on it. I can buy the lot next to you, tear the house out, and put in 10 units.
I'm not sure about that one. But
Yeah.
there's some, again, we're looking at it. I just got a summary from Wes, did a summary for me today. And my understanding is you can't just, thankfully, buy up a whole neighborhood and knock all the homes down and build fourplexes everywhere. So that's my understanding. But, and then, of course,
I'll read it again, but I could see in there that a person could buy the house next to you, tear it down, and put in up to 10 units on it. And,
I haven't seen that, thankfully, but again, we're looking at it.
yeah.
Now, unless it was a transit stop.
Yep.
Also, if it is a historical site, they can still tear it down.
I'm not, again, I think there's a lot of ins and outs, but I have not,
So-
I've heard that you can't actually, it's the opposite. So, but anyways, we'll be looking at it closely.
Yeah, I'd like to have, if you could come back to us and
Sure.
explain how SB 9 and SB 10 affects what's going on in Clovis, so we
Right.
know how to deal with things in the future. But, as I see it, what we're looking at tonight will have to be altered some because of SB 9 and SB 10.
We'll have to deal with the lot splits for sure, and how that works, and ability to build 2 units.
Because they're talking about, because they talk about lot splits, and in order to split the lot, a homeowner has to own the house. If you've got a mortgage on it, you cannot split the lot, and,
Oh, yeah, and for 3 years, again, there's a lot of nuances, and then it can't be split at more than 40%, so you're gonna have to most likely knock down, again, there's a lot, it's not gonna just open the doors to a Pandora of these
it's
fourplexes.
getting close.
It is, that'll be the next bill next year. So, yeah.
I think there's a distinction to it, not that we're dealing with that this evening, but generally as it relates to housing legislation. Whereas SB 9, as described, kind of focuses on the 2 additional units per lot and the lot splits. SB 10 allows, my reading allows, but does not require a local agency to adopt an ordinance allowing 10 units on an existing residential lot. So SB 10 appears to be permissive, but not mandatory.
And that's our reading too, from at least my report today.
Okay, I've got a list, but that's enough. Any other questions?
Yeah, I want to tag on to that, and I know I'm speaking, I would hope I'm speaking to all the people here that, kind of feel the same way that I do about this. It's a state law, so I presume it's binding on the city. And, I don't know what the purpose of our vote is tonight, other than to formalize the city ordinance. But as I see it, Mr. City Attorney.
Well, I think some of the, having the preliminary application, the objective standards, those are all mandatory requirements, but our own processes, how we're gonna handle that, it can be a little bit unique. So there is some nuances, which is important why and also if we don't do it, then our whole ordinance, all our ordinances go away. It's kind of, I can't define that precisely.
I
but-
understand.
So it's very important that we have our own ordinance in place.
Can you give me I've struggled through this and in between unintended naps when I'm getting through half the page. Can you define ADU, accessory dwelling units versus junior accessory dwelling units? Is it, as I read it, square footage? Is it size?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of a couple of things, and Maria, feel free to jump in. Maria deals with a lot of these questions directly. And ADU can be attached or detached, and it can be up to 1,200 square feet
Or,
of total floor area.
or 150 square feet?
At least 150, but it can go up to 1,200.
Yeah, but what I'm getting at is we can actually have a dwelling unit that's 150 square feet, and if I read it correctly, it doesn't even require a toilet.
I believe an ADU does. A junior ADU, the state allows the sanitation facilities to be included in the primary unit. Bree's nodding her head.
That's correct. So with the junior ADU, one of the requirements is that it has to have an efficiency kitchen, which is more of a
Hot
thing.
plate.
Yeah, and with the accessory dwelling unit, it has to provide a full kitchen as well as a full bathroom.
Conjures up all sorts of interesting questions between it. It really does. I'm vehemently opposed to the state shoving this down our necks. And if I thought it would do any good at all, I would be an adamant no on this. But I'm very understanding of how we're handcuffed into having to do this, but it doesn't stop me from venting my spleen to, I hope, some ears that, if not in agreement, at least are sympathetic. Thank you.
Okay, any more discussion? I guess, because there's nothing for us to really vote on.
This is an ordinance amendment that we're asking for a resolution recommending approval to the council.
Okay, you want a recommendation from us? Okay, so open for a motion for recommendation.
Also moved. I'll move.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the development code amendments as presented. We have a motion by Commissioner Hatcher, seconded by Chair Hinkle. Commissioner Hatcher?
Yes.
Chair Hinkle?
Yes.
Commissioner Bedstead?
Yes.
Commissioner Cunningham?
No.
Okay, anything else?
Mr. Chair, before you adjourn, I realized that I did not, or failed to make a couple of notes regarding some personnel changes that have occurred in the department. So this evening, we're pleased to announce that Mr. Caperton is wearing a new hat. He's transitioned from his role as a senior planner to the deputy city planner. Now he gets to do all the really hard work is what I'm kind of planning on. Also this evening, we have some personnel headed the other way, and this is Maria's last evening in her role. She's told us recently that she's going to be heading off to what we all hope for her is greener pastures in a new role. So wish her well, and I'm sure we'll be seeing her again in some capacity, but we'll have somebody new sitting in that chair trying to fill her shoes when we come back in October.
Good best wishes, Ricky. Congratulations, well earned.
Okay, I will adjourn the meeting at 6:48.